Paris. July 27th, 1794. The city wakes beneath a pale, exhausted sky. The Seine glints like a blade drawn halfway from its sheath. Bakers haul bread from ovens, soldiers tramp through narrow streets, and somewhere a cart rattles toward the square of the Revolution, empty for now, but heavy with memory. In these streets every knock can mean arrest, every whisper can mean death. For more than a year the guillotine has ruled more faithfully than any king. It has cut through nobles and beggars, generals and priests, the guilty and the innocent alike. The Republic of Virtue, Robespierre's dream, now breathes in fear. The same ideals that once promised liberty have hardened into instruments of suspicion. Paris moves like a man who knows he's being watched. At the centre of it stands one figure, Maximilien Robespierre, the incorruptible, a man who in the name of purity demanded the impossible. To his followers he is the moral spine of the revolution, the voice that saved France from chaos and kings. To his enemies he is something else entirely, a priest of death, disguised as a philosopher. He quotes Rousseau like scripture and signs execution lists before breakfast. His white cravat, always immaculate, seems to defy the grime of the streets, as if he alone remains unstained by the blood he orders spilled. But even icons crack. The Convention France's revolutionary parliament has begun to tremble beneath the weight of its own terror. Deputies sleep with pistols by their beds, fearing dawn arrests. Factions once bound by shared revolution now fracture into camps of self-preservation. Whispers travel faster than decrees. Who will be next? Who will be accused? Who will denounce first to survive? And at the centre of all these questions, one name keeps surfacing: Robespierre. The man who has condemned thousands now stands surrounded by rumours that he has drawn up new lists. Even his closest allies no longer feel safe. 900 a.m. The hall of the National Convention. The air is heavy close. Sunlight filters through tall windows slanting across benches filled with 800 deputies. Some shuffle papers, others avoid eye contact. The wooden floor creaks under shifting boots, then a familiar sound, footsteps deliberate echoing from the far end. Robespierre climbs the rostrum. For 5 years he has ruled this chamber with words sharper than any sword. His voice, once calm and precise, has steered mobs, silenced rivals, inspired terror. But today something is different. He begins his speech, 2 hours long, winding through his favourite themes: virtue and vice, corruption and purity, the need to purge enemies hidden within the revolution. At first the hall listens in cautious silence. But then his tone falters, his throat tightens, his hands tremble slightly on the podium. Those closest can see sweat darkening the edge of his collar. There is a conspiracy against public liberty, he declares, his eyes blazing. Yet he does not say who. The words hang in the air like smoke. Deputies shift uneasily. The silence after each sentence stretches too long. His refusal to name names is fatal. Every man in the room begins to wonder if he himself is on the list. He speaks of treachery, of plots against the Republic, but offers no proof. Once this ambiguity inspired awe, now it breeds panic. The orator who once commanded France now seems lost inside his own rhetoric, looping phrases like a broken hymn. From the benches murmurs begin. Men exchange glances, lean toward one another whispering. The lines between fear and defiance blur. One deputy scratches the edge of his bench until his knuckles bleed. Another taps a quill nervously against a parchment, a tiny relentless sound beneath the thunder of Robespierre's voice. He continues on and on about purity, betrayal, and virtue's lonely price. His words sound almost confessional now, a man talking to ghosts rather than colleagues. He raises his hand, palm trembling slightly, and concludes, "Enemies surround us. I will not name them, the guilty know who they are." It is meant as thunder. It lands as doom. The silence that follows cuts sharper than applause. Usually after his speeches the room erupts chants of "Vive la République" echoing off the marble. Today there is only the faint scrape of chairs. A few scattered claps, polite, uncertain. Robespierre's eyes move across the chamber. Once those faces would have bowed. Now they look back, cold, measuring, waiting. It is in this silence, historians say, that the revolution turned. For the first time, Robespierre feels what his victims felt, the collective gaze of judgment. The incorruptible has spoken and found himself condemned by his own restraint. He steps down from the vaulted rostrum. His footsteps sound louder now, unsteady. Behind him the whispers rise like a tide. By noon, the tide will become a storm. The chamber turns betrayal in real time. 11:30 a.m. The speech is finished. The silence that follows is unbearable. Deputies glance at each other, unsure who will move first. Then a scraping of chairs, one man stands. Tallien, a Jacobin once loyal to Robespierre, now pale with fury. His voice cuts the tension like a blade. You talk of conspirators, but you dare not name them. So let us name one you, Robespierre. The words ripple through the hall. Heads turn. In the gallery above, spectators lean forward. The sound of murmuring swells into a wave. Robespierre freezes. This is not opposition, it is rebellion. From the benches rise more voices. Vadier, Bilot, Varenne, Barrère, once allies, now wolves who smell blood. Dictator, someone shouts. Tyrant. Another deputy bangs his fist on the desk. Shall we be slaves again? For the first time in months, the chamber feels alive, not with fear but with vengeance. The revolution's watchdogs have turned on their master. Robespierre tries to respond. He rises slowly, opens his mouth, but no sound comes. His throat constricts. His voice dies before it reaches the air. Deputies stare in disbelief. The man who weaponized words now stands mute. Around him the noise builds. Down with the tyrant rolls like thunder through the hall. Papers flutter. Benches rattle. Men who have sat frozen through months of blood now find sudden courage in numbers. In that frenzy of shouting and pounding fists, something changes. The chamber ceases to be a parliament and becomes a tribunal. Collot d'Herbois, presiding over the session, calls for order. None comes. Robespierre and his accomplices are under arrest, he declares. The decree passes almost instantly, carried not by procedure but by panic. They name the inner circle Louis-Antoine de Saint-Just, the pale angel of the terror. Only 26, his speeches once hailed as sacred. Georges Couthon, paralysed, confined to a wheelchair, his soft voice, the calm face of cruelty. Augustin Robespierre, the younger brother, devoted, impulsive. Le Bas soldier, loyal to the end. All condemned in one sweep of the hand. A clerk records the vote. The quill trembles. He knows what he's writing will end in blood. The guards move forward. The accused are escorted out amid jeers and applause. It sounds less like a political act than an exorcism. The revolution purges its own demons in broad daylight. Outside Paris is a city listening. Word of the arrest spreads faster than any decree. Messengers gallop through streets, through markets, through cafes shouting the news. Bells toll from the churches that had been silenced by decree. The incorruptible has fallen. But not everyone rejoices. Across the river in the Hôtel de Ville, the Commune hears the news and refuses to obey. These are Robespierre's loyalists, the municipal government that controls the National Guard, the very heart of Paris's armed force. To them, the Convention's arrest order is not justice, it is treason. By 2 p.m, the first detachments of armed men are already moving. Drums beat through the Marais, shouts echo down narrow alleys. To the rescue of the incorruptible, the city fractures along invisible fault lines, neighbourhoods of fear, neighbourhoods of loyalty. The sans-culottes, once the People's Army, now split between two masters. On one side, the Convention claiming the authority of the Republic. On the other, the Commune claiming the purity of revolution. Between them lies the city armed, hungry and ready to explode. In the Committee of General Security, deputies argue furiously. Orders clash. Arrest warrants are issued, then countermanded. No one knows who commands the gendarmes anymore. France for a few hours has two governments, both revolutionary, both convinced of their righteousness. Then the impossible happens. Commune troops storm the building on Rue Honoré where Robespierre and his companions are held. The guards, confused and outnumbered, surrender without a fight. The prisoners are freed to shouts of Vive Robespierre, but victory tastes hollow. Paris trembles on the edge of civil war. The rescued men move quickly through the gathering dust. As carriages, abandoned horses, spooked by drums and cries. They are taken to the Hôtel de Ville, the seat of the Commune, the great stone building that watches over the Seine. Its windows glow with candlelight. Inside the rooms fill with tension and sweat. It is here in this vast hall where proclamations of liberty were once read aloud to cheering crowds that Robespierre will make his final stand. City Hall, his fortress, his refuge, and before dawn his prison. City Hall, fortress trap, and the dissolution of loyalty. Evening bleeds into the streets of Paris. The sky over the Seine burns in streaks of crimson, as if the day itself has been executed. Inside the Hôtel de Ville, the air smells of sweat, smoke and ink. The Commune's loyalists have transformed the building into a barricaded fortress, doors bolted, windows barred, guards stationed with muskets trembling in their hands. Candlelight flickers across maps spread on oak tables over ink stains and half-drunk cups of wine. Piles of proclamations defend the Republic. Save the incorruptible wait to be distributed. But no one dares to leave the room. Each hour passes heavier than the last. Robespierre sits in a small office near the central corridor, a shabby space lined with ledgers and unpaid bills. For years he spoke for France. Tonight he cannot command a single street. His brother Augustin paces like a caged animal. Couthon, confined to his wheelchair, whispers prayers no one hears. Saint-Just stands apart by the window staring at the dark river, the reflection of lanterns like drifting stars. Outside, drums echo through the arrondissements. The convention's troops are moving. Word filters in that artillery has been positioned at the bridges, iron throats pointed toward the Hôtel de Ville, but inside hope flickers dangerously. They still expect General Henriot, commander of the National Guard and Robespierre's most violent ally, to arrive with reinforcements. Men whisper his name like a spell. Henriot will come. He'll turn the cannons on the convention. Time crawls. The candles burn low, and then near midnight footsteps echo in the stairwell. Doors swing open. Henriot appears drunk, staggering, his uniform unbuttoned. His eyes glazed with brandy. He salutes or something like it, then collapses onto a bench. The silence that follows is worse than gunfire. In that moment, everyone understands the rescue they were waiting for will never come. Henriot mutters, curses, incoherent orders. His officers exchange glances. Fear, disgust, disbelief. Some slip away into the corridors. Others quietly remove their tricolour cockades, the badges of loyalty, and vanish into the night. One clerk leaves behind his satchel and runs without looking back. The fortress begins to empty. By 1 a.m. the Hôtel de Ville feels hollow voices echo where crowds stood hours earlier. In distant rooms, the sound of breaking glass as someone ransacks a desk for coins. Outside, Paris holds its breath. The windows of nearby houses are shuttered tight, even though the cats have disappeared. Robespierre remains motionless, seated at his desk, staring at the flame of a single candle. His jaw tightens, his hands clasped before him as though in prayer. Those who watch him later say it was not indecision that held him there, but a grim awareness of fate, the knowledge that running would not save him. Where could he go? Every city in France has a guillotine. Every mayor has his name. His face is painted on pamphlets and walls. He is both architect and prisoner of his own fame. Augustin urges him to flee horses, wait beyond the city gates, boats moored on the Seine. Brother, we can still escape. Robespierre shakes his head slowly, and go where his voice, calm and hollow, seems to echo from another world. It is pride, perhaps, or resignation. Maybe the conviction that he is still the revolution, that the people will rise before dawn. But Paris has no strength left for miracles. Couthon wheels himself closer, tears streaking his cheeks. We have done our duty, he murmurs. The rest belongs to Providence. Saint-Just says nothing. He closes his eyes and whispers, the revolution is frozen. Outside, the boots of the convention's troops drum nearer a steady, disciplined rhythm. The sound of the wheels follows artillery being positioned on the quays. Soldiers shout orders, horses snort in the dark, then a bell tolls from across the city. 1, 2, 3, the signal that the law of outlawry has been declared. It is an ancient decree older than the Republic itself. To be outlawed means no trial, no appeal, a living death sentence. From this moment, anyone may kill Robespierre on sight. The man who turned legality into terror now finds the law turned against him, written in the same language of expedience he once used to justify the blade. In the alleys of Paris, criers shout the decree. Robespierre and his accomplices are outlawed. Handbills are plastered to walls still damp with the day's heat. 15,000 francs for his head. Paris becomes a hunting ground. Soldiers stalk the bridges. Deputies arm themselves in their offices. By the flickering light of torches, mobs form unsure whether to kill or cheer. Inside City Hall, Robespierre sits in silence, listening to the raw building outside, the roar that used to belong to him. The fortress is surrounded. The walls that once kept enemies out now only keep fate in. The final assault. Chaos, misfire, and fall. The night deepens. Midnight slides over Paris like a shroud. The Hôtel de Ville stands in eerie stillness, its stone facade lit by a few trembling torches, the tricolour flag hanging limp in the heat. Inside, candlelight bleeds through the cracks of barricaded doors. The corridors smell of wax, sweat, and powder. For hours, the men inside have waited for a signal that never came. The last dispatches from the Commune have gone unanswered. The National Guard units who once swore allegiance to Robespierre have not returned. The silence outside grows heavier, more deliberate. These defenders know what it means the convention is coming. A few still cling to their posts. Young clerks with shaking hands reload muskets they've barely fired. A wounded courier sleeps in the corner, his uniform soaked in blood. Somewhere a man weeps softly, calling for his wife. The sound echoes down the marble corridors, swallowed by the vastness of the hall. Then, distant at first, the thud of boots. The sound rolls through the night like approaching thunder. A single musket shot cracks in reply, then another. Someone screams. The siege has begun. From 3 directions, the convention's forces close in 6,000 soldiers with cannon and bayonets, the streets echoing with shouted orders. The first volley smashes through the windows of the main chamber glass, exploding in a storm of shards. Smoke pours into the hall, thick and acrid. Candles topple. The room fills with gunpowder haze, the air alive with the hiss of burning wicks and the snap of muskets. Couthon's wheelchair overturns. Papers scatter across the floor. Proclamations, oaths, death warrants. Blood splashes over the very documents that once condemned others. Saint-Just fires once from a barricade of desks, then lowers his weapon. Enough, he murmurs. We die as we lived for an idea. His hands are steady, his face strangely serene, lit by the glow of flames licking at the papers. Augustin Robespierre runs to a window, looks down at the square below. Soldiers forming ranks, torches swaying like red stars. He climbs the sill without hesitation. Better this than their mercy. He leaps. The crowd gasps. The impact below echoes like a drumbeat, bones breaking against the stones. Inside, the chaos intensifies. The defenders scatter. Muskets clatter to the floor. The smell of cordite mixes with the sweet metallic scent of blood. In a small committee room, Maximilien Robespierre sits at a table, head bowed over a sheet of paper. His handwriting trembles as he tries to sign his name, a final letter, perhaps to his sister, perhaps to no one. He hears the shots growing nearer, the boots on marble, the crash of doors splintering one after another. Lebas presses a pistol to his temple and fires. His body falls across a pile of documents, revolutionary decrees now stained black with blood. A moment later, Robespierre lifts his own pistol. His hand shakes, his finger hesitates. He is not a soldier. He was never good with weapons, his faith has always been in words. The barrel quivers, a flash, a sound like thunder trapped in stone. When the smoke clears, he is still alive. The ball has torn through his lower jaw, shattering bone-severing tongue. His face collapses in a ruin of blood and flesh. He falls backward, clutching his neck, choking on his own scream. Some say it was suicide, others a soldier's bullet. It hardly matters now. Couthon lies unconscious at the foot of the stairs, his broken body twisted like a doll. Saint-Just stands unarmed, whispering something no one will ever record. The revolution's angels have fallen one by one. By 1:15 a.m. the doors burst open. Soldiers flood the corridors. The Commune's defence collapses in minutes. No resistance, only the sickening echo of boots and the moans of the wounded. In the committee room, they find Robespierre slumped against the wall, his face wrapped in a pool of blood. His eyes are open glassy with shock. The soldiers hesitate this man. The terror of France looks like a broken child. One lifts him by the shoulders, his jaw dangles loose, barely attached. They drag him through the wreckage of the Hôtel de Ville, overturned chairs as charred paper as shattered glass. The floor is slick with blood and candle wax. The air tastes of sulphur and smoke. Outside, the night has turned hot and windless. Torches illuminate the square, now crowded with soldiers and onlookers. Augustin still breathes faintly where he fell. The rest of the Commune's leaders are dragged out in chains. 2:00 a.m, the stretchers are loaded. Robespierre's face is bandaged crudely with a strip of tablecloth soaked crimson. They carry him through the narrow streets of Paris, through crowds that hiss and curse, throwing stones and spittle. Tyrant, they cry. Murderer. Windows burst open as the procession passes. People lean out with candles, wanting to see the face of the man who terrorized them. But his face is gone. 3:30 a.m. At the Tuileries, an army surgeon examines him by candlelight. Jaw shattered, in 3 places teeth missing, tongue nearly severed. The wound reeks of powder and blood. He will live, the surgeon says, long enough to die properly. They stitch him, bind his face, and set him on a cot. He cannot speak, only breathe in short, wet gasps. His eyes dart around the room, a man trapped inside his own silence. And then, with cruel symmetry, they place him on a table inside the Committee of Public Safety, his own office. His signature still lies on papers beside him. Death warrants with his name at the bottom. He is now one of them. The man who ruled France through ink and fear lies among his victims' paperwork, breathing through rags. In the corner, a candle burns down to its wick. The room smells of vinegar blood and revolution dying of its own disease. The procession from office to scaffold. Dawn crawls across Paris grey and pitiless. The night smoke still hangs low over the Seine, carrying the scent of burnt powder and sweat. In the committee chamber, Robespierre lies motionless, bound in dirty linen, his jaw clamped by a makeshift bandage. The sunlight that spills through the high windows feels foreign, as if the morning itself refuses to touch him. By 10 o'clock the decree is signed. No trial, no defence. The once mighty architect of revolutionary justice will face the same justice he perfected, swift, wordless absolute. Outside, the streets begin to fill. News travels faster than bread. Robespierre is to die today. The words race from shop to shop, from baker to market stall. Vendors abandon their counters. Mothers clutch their children and push through the crowd. Every window opens. Every corner becomes a vantage point. When the tumbril arrives, Paris holds its breath. The same rough wooden cart that carried Marie Antoinette now waits in the courtyard. The wheels crusted with old mud and dried blood. The condemned are loaded in groups 22 in total: Robespierre, Saint-Just, Couthon, and others who once decided the fate of France with a stroke of the pen. The executioner's assistants move briskly, almost gently. They know their trade. Robespierre can barely stand. His body is propped against the cart's side. A soldier ties his arms behind him with a length of rope. The crowd leans forward, eager, feral, whispering, laughing. The procession begins. The cart rattles over cobblestones, each jolt sending a tremor through Robespierre's broken face. His bandage darkens with fresh blood. He cannot speak, cannot beg, cannot curse. His eyes half-closed flutter as the city moves past streets he once ruled by decree, now lined with faces twisted in triumph. Vendors trail the procession, hawking wine, bread and chestnuts. Children dart between soldiers' legs. A boy throws a stone, it strikes the wooden cart and bounces off. His mother laughs and ruffles his hair. An old woman, her face hard as bark, spits into the dirt as the cart rolls by. "I cheered for you once, Maximilien," she mutters. "Never again." Near Rue Saint-Honoré, the crowd thickens into a human wall. Men climb lamp-posts waving flags, their voices rising. Down with the tyrant. From a window, someone dumps a bucket of pig's blood onto the street. It splashes against the wheels, dripping like tears. Among the onlookers stands Duplay, the carpenter who once gave Robespierre a home, the same man who treated him as a son, who built the lectern from which he delivered his greatest speeches. Now he watches from behind a curtain, expression unreadable. When the cart passes, he closes the window. The route twists through the heart of Paris, a macabre parade of democracy. Soldiers march with bayonets gleaming. Their boots strike in unison. The condemned sway with each turn, bound and silent. Saint-Just stares ahead, face calm as if already beyond this world. Couthon's wheelchair is strapped to the wagon, his lifeless hands folded in his lap. The city that once trembled now jeers without fear. By the time the procession reaches Rue Saint-Antoine, the noise has grown into a storm. Tens of thousands of voices, laughter, curses, cheers. The air tastes of dust and anticipation. 2:30 p.m. Place de la Révolution. The guillotine rises black against the afternoon sky, its blade glinting in sunlight. The scaffold is ringed by soldiers and surrounded by a mass of humanity. Some pray, some sell wine, some simply stare hungry for spectacle. The first to ascend are the lesser names, clerks, deputies, forgotten administrators. One after another they fall. The crowd roars at each thud, the guillotine's rhythm mechanical, almost musical. The executioner Charles-Henri Sanson works with practiced grace, a craftsman in red. Then it is Robespierre's turn. He is lifted from the cart, barely conscious. The soldiers drag him up the steps. Sanson tears the bandage from his face. The movement rips open the half-healed wound. A scream bursts from Robespierre's throat, raw and animal, the first sound he's made in 2 days. The crowd falls silent. Even the birds seem to stop. Sanson adjusts the plank checks. The bolts lowers the lunette. Robespierre's blood-smeared eyes open. For a heartbeat, he seems to see everything: the scaffold, the soldiers, the ocean of faces. Recognition dawns slow and terrible. This machine, this blade, this ritual, all of it is his creation. He breathes once sharply, understanding. The blade falls, a sound like thunder, then eruption. The square explodes in joy, the crowd surges, people cheering, laughing, sobbing. Hats fly into the air, church bells silent for months begin to ring, first one, then another, then all of Paris in peal and echo. Sanson holds up the head. The crowd howls approval. For the first time in years there is music in the streets, fiddles, drums, a broken rhythm of relief. Wine pours like water. Strangers embrace. Paris, drunk on blood and freedom, dances atop the dust of its own terror. By dusk, the scaffold is washed clean. Bodies are loaded onto carts covered in straw and taken away. The blood darkens between the cobbles. As the bells continue to toll, officials begin another ritual, quieter, colder, equally merciless. They seal Robespierre's home, catalogue his belongings, and start the official inventory. The revolution has devoured its last prophet. The house cleared, trophies, books, and a dog. Evening falls over a city that feels newly reborn. Bells still echo faintly across the rooftops, but the jubilation has already curdled into curiosity. The tyrant is dead now. Paris wants to see how a tyrant lived. By the time the executioner's assistants have finished cleaning the scaffold, a crowd has gathered outside Rue Saint-Honoré. They stand before the modest brick building that once served as Robespierre's home, part office, part sanctuary. It looks nothing like a palace. The shutters are plain, the courtyard small. A faded tricolour flag droops in the corner. When the door opens, the crowd surges forward. Some push inside, others lean through the windows. It's not looting, not exactly, more like archaeology. They want relics, proof that the monster bled, that he owned a bed, that he was human after all. The first discovery stops them cold. Hanging neatly in a wardrobe, the famous green coat. The one he wore at the convention during speeches that sent men to their deaths. His fabric still carries the faint scent of lavender and tobacco. Someone tears off a sleeve, another rips away a button. Within minutes the garment is shredded to ribbons, each scrap pocketed like a holy relic turned upside down. The coat that once commanded fear becomes a carnival souvenir. Upstairs the scene grows quieter. Officials from the Committee of General Security have arrived to take inventory. Quills scratch across parchment. Seals are pressed into wax. Every object, no matter how small, is recorded. A brass inkstand, a chipped mirror, a pair of spectacles wrapped in linen. Then they find the books. Hundreds of volumes line the shelves, worn spines, dog-eared pages, annotations in a precise, careful hand. Rousseau, of course, dominates the collection. The Social Contract, Emile Confessions. There are also works on Roman law, Livy's histories, Plutarch's lives of the noble Greeks and Romans, even a few volumes of poetry, Racine, Corneille, fragments of Virgil. The investigators pause. This was no decadent tyrant. There is no gold, no luxury, no wine cellar. Only paper, ink, and philosophy. It's as if the man tried to live as an idea. His desk is spotless. The inkwell is half-full quill, sharpened to a fine point. Beside it a small wooden crucifix, oddly out of place for a man who abolished God. And on the chair, a folded cloak, grey wool, the hem threadbare from years of wear. In one corner a faint sound breaks the silence, a whine, a paw scratching at a locked door. An official forces it open. Out stumbles a small brown dog ribs, showing eyes wide. It's Brant Robespierre's companion for nearly a decade. Half-starved, trembling tail between its legs. Someone laughs nervously. Even the tyrant's dog is miserable. But another man, a clerk from the district, bends down and strokes its head. The animal presses against his leg, desperate for touch. The moment hangs in the air, a flicker of pity in a room that has known none. Later that night the clerk will take Brant home. No one records his name. The dog vanishes from history, the only creature to mourn Robespierre. As the inventory continues, the pattern becomes clear. Modest furniture, plain dishes, no silver, no debt, no hidden fortune. His personal wealth amounts to barely 800 livres less than what a craftsman earns in a year. The man who ruled France lived poorer than many of those he condemned, yet his simplicity feels hollow, now even menacing. To the officials leafing through his notebooks, austerity no longer seems like virtue, it feels like armour. A man who denied himself everything except conviction. They whisper that his purity was not moral but surgical, the cold discipline of someone who removed compassion like an infected limb. Near midnight, they reach the desk again. One of the investigators, Citizen Courtois, runs his hand along the drawer searching for a latch. His fingers pause at a small irregularity in the wood. A soft click. The drawer slides open. Inside lies a bundle of documents bound by a green ribbon. Letters, reports, folded sheets covered in Robespierre's fine script. The handwriting is unmistakable, deliberate, symmetrical, merciless. They read the first few pages, lists of names, committee notes, unsent drafts of speeches, orders written but never delivered. And beneath them more papers, coded messages, circulars to provincial deputies, fragments of unfinished decrees. The tone is colder than any rhetoric, the phrasing mechanical. The revolution reduced to administration. The room grows still. The scratching of quills stops. They exchange glances, uncertain, uneasy. The dog whines again, sensing the shift. Something in these papers feels different. Not the chaos of a dying regime, but the order of a mind still at work. A pattern, a method. Courtois closes the drawer slowly, his face pale in the candlelight. Seal everything he orders. Tomorrow we begin the examination. Outside the city hums with drunken celebration. But inside the narrow room, among the books and silence, the first shadow of a darker truth begins to take shape, that the terror was no storm of madness but a design. The list. Paper plans for a final purge. The drawer that no one expected became the country's most damning artifact. Under the dim candlelight, investigators spread the papers across a wooden table and watched the revolution reveal itself in ink. The handwriting was neat, patient, the stroke of a man who planned more than he preached. What lay there was not the chaotic scribble of a paranoid mind, but the architecture of coercion, lists, columns, dates and orders like the blueprints of a factory. At the centre of it all, a list of names, 137 in all, written in Robespierre's precise hand. Not a litany of random enemies, but a classified programme organised into sections and priorities. The first section enumerated the moderates men in the convention whose reluctance had been inconvenient, deputies who questioned, the pace of terror ministers who proposed restraint, administrators who hesitated to sign an arrest warrant. The second section contained a darker surprise, allies. Names of men who had once stood at Robespierre's side, propagandists, committee clerks, commanders, now crossed out and annotated with instructions. Even fidelity could be excised by a pen. The third set listed bureaucrats, judges, mayors, provincial commanders, the administrative scaffolding that made mass executions possible. Each name had beside it a note place time method. Some entries included contingency orders for regional arrests to occur simultaneously. Others listed which prisons would be used, which judges would rubber stamp the procedures, which transport routes would move the condemned. Beneath the names lay the timetable. July 30th was circled and underlined. The schedule read like the start of a campaign rather than the end of a policy. Mobilization orders, arrest squads, lists of guillotine sites, plans for rapid trials or no trials at all. There were drafts of speeches intended to prepare public opinion, set the narrative and justify the purge as an act of national salvation, the same rhetorical machinery Robespierre had used to legitimize earlier waves of repression. In other folders, military instructions detailed how to reassign commanders overnight, decapitate local leadership, and replace reluctant officers with loyalists. The plan assumed speed, coordination, and the element of surprise. As the officials turned the pages, another quieter narrative emerged. The terror had become institutional. The machinery of violence no longer depended on improvisation or on a few zealous deputies. It had become an ordered system with clerk stamps and budgets. There were forms for arrest warrants, standardized templates for surveillance reports, coded telegrams for provincial communication. The bureaucracy had learned to speak in execution schedules. Arrests could be mass-produced like prints from a press. The revolution had matured into an administrative monster. That institutionalization deepened the moral horror. Loyalty, once a currency of safety, had no purchasing power against a system that valued purge more than piety. Names of trusted aides were cross-notes added in the margins. If compromised, remove immediately. In one draft, a list of men who had escorted Robespierre to safety the previous day had annotations recommending their immediate replacement. The man who preached virtue had planned to burn through friends to build the next order. The paper proved that paranoia was not a personal failing alone. It was a political strategy. The documents also revealed the fiscal logic beneath the violence. France's coffers were empty. The wars had bled, the state dry synods had collapsed in value, tax collection had frayed as administrators feared denouncement. Robespierre's papers contained calculations and proposals, increase confiscations, seize property from the condemned, liquidate assets to fund military pay and commissary needs. Death here had an accounting ledger. Executions would not only purge dissent but also replenish the treasury. Revolution had become economic policy, a grim arithmetic where human lives translated into livres. The correlation between confiscation and governance exposed a cynical calculus terror as fiscal remedy. Journal entries completed the portrait. Short-dated notes in a different hand, sometimes feverish, tracked suspicions, alleged plots, and nightly anxieties. June and July pages bristled with insomnia, with entries of names checked and rechecked, with sudden entries instructing surveillance on deputies who had once been allies. A final passage on July 26th, written larger and underlined, read like a summation of resolve: tomorrow I will speak. If virtue must be saved, sacrifices must be made. The rhetoric had moved from abstract virtue to a calendar-bound action. It was not rhetoric alone, it was resolve. The black and white clarity of those pages made the intent chillingly plain. What the archive showed in some was not a deranged Matthison scribbling in a fever, but a regime that had learned to organize terror. The language of law warrants, orders, signatures had been repurposed into instruments of murder. Procedures meant to ensure justice now guaranteed speed and efficiency in killing. The revolution's own administrative reach, which once delivered bread and passports, now delivered condemnation. The state's capacity to manage and document became its capacity to annihilate. The implications were immediate and terrifying. If Robespierre's plan had been carried out, the purge scheduled for July 30th would have unseated the convention, emptied the provinces of experienced administrators, and rearranged the army's command structure overnight. France's fragile defences would have been leaderless in the face of foreign foes. An internal winter of mass executions would have followed, with confiscation policies destabilising local economies and driving populations to revolt. A swift, centralised dictatorship would have replaced the already trembling representative system. The revolution would not have ended tyranny, it would have industrialised it. Yet history in its brittle contingency took another path. The pistol's misfire, the late arrival of soldiers, the brief delay in assault accidents that read like miracles interrupted the timetable. Mistakes in human muscle and timing thwarted the most carefully drawn lines on paper. What might have been a systematic synchronized purge became instead an abrupt localized collapse of a leadership in a single city hall. France was spared not by virtue but by mischance, a botched suicide, a drunk commander a few minutes here and there. The documents under the candlelight made that reality unavoidable. Had the curve of events been 20 minutes different, the list of 137 names would have become a sequence of arrests, trials, and executions, and the Republic might have been remade in the image of one man. When the investigators finally resealed the bundles and marked each sheet with the government stamp, they paused, not only with relief but with a new dread. The terror had not been a spontaneous eruption, it had been designed. The revolution's end that summer was not triumph but an evasion, a narrow escape from a deliberate plan of annihilation. Paper in the end had written the fate of a nation. Luck had unstitched that fate. The country that survived July 1794 did so on the slender margin between intent and error. Accident, luck, and the lessons of July Saint-Mer. Dawn, July 29th. Paris is quiet at last, Horace. The city that once trembled beneath decrees and denunciations now exhales in exhausted relief. But inside the government archives, the night's work continues. The investigators sit surrounded by Robespierre's papers, the lists, orders, and coded instructions now stacked in careful piles. Wax seals cool on envelopes that may never be opened again. They know what they hold. Not merely evidence of conspiracy, but a mirror to the revolution itself, a revolution that built a machine so precise it almost destroyed its maker. As they work, realization dawns: the terror did not end through justice or repentance. It ended through chance, a gun that misfired, a commander who arrived drunk, a handful of soldiers who chose one staircase over another. History that night turned on the tremor of a hand. Had the pistol found its mark, Robespierre would have died a martyr and his followers would have carried out the purge in his name. Had the assault on the Hôtel de Ville come an hour later, the lists would have been enacted and Paris might have awoken to a dawn of arrests, executions, and serents. France stood one breath away from industrialized death. Multiple guillotine sites, steam-driven blades, a nation reorganized around annihilation. Instead, the revolution collapsed in on itself like a dying star, the machinery of fear folding into stillness. In the following days, the investigators recorded everything. The secret drawer, the 137 names, the orders to purge the army and rebuild command, the financial plans to fund the state through confiscation, the architectural sketches for new execution sites. They wrote it all down, then sealed it away. The archives were locked, the evidence buried under layers of bureaucracy and time. What could not be destroyed was simply forgotten. And so in that bureaucratic silence the terror ended, not with a speech or an act of courage, but with paperwork filed into darkness. Outside, Paris returned to its rhythms. Bakers reopened. Bells rang again from churches that had been mute for months. The markets filled with chatter. Children the smell of bread instead of blood. Yet beneath the surface the air still carried an ache as if the stones themselves were unbearable. The same cobblestones that drank the blood of the condemned now absorbed the sound of footsteps returning to ordinary life. On Rue Saint-Honoré, Robespierre's house stood sealed. Its windows shuttered, its rooms emptied. The investigators had taken what they needed, leaving behind only dust and echoes. But in one small corner of the city something still moved the dog Brant. Adopted by a street sweeper, he wandered the alleys for years, growing grey, and so a silent shadow of a man, and a time both vanished. In the end, that image lingers more than the guillotine a loyal animal, looking for a master who will never return. What remains of July 1794 is not only history's spectacle, but its warning. The revolution began with virtue and ended with arithmetic. The dream of moral purity hardened into violence because no one thought virtue itself could become a weapon. When law fused with conviction, when procedure replaced conscience, the republic turned against itself. Every tyranny the papers suggest begins not with hatred, but with certainty. That is the final irony of the terror. It was never born from chaos, but from order, a perfect order that believed it could purify humanity. And yet in its pursuit of perfection it destroyed the very soul it sought to save. The lesson endures far beyond France. Power, once mechanized, begins to move on its own. Bureaucracy gives it hands, ideology gives it purpose, fear keeps it fed. The only antidote is doubt, the quiet humility to question one's own righteousness. As the investigators finish their report, sealing the last envelope with wax, one of them pauses before extinguishing the candle. The flame wavers, then steadies. "We were lucky," he murmurs. Another replies, "Luck should not have to save a nation." Outside the Seine glides beneath the bridges, calm, indifferent, eternal. Paris forgets nothing, it only waits. And so the story of the incorruptible ends not in glory but in silence. His name becomes dust in a ledger, his vision reduced to ashes of paper. Yet his shadow lingers a reminder that every revolution carries within it the seeds of the next terror, and that freedom survives only when conscience speaks louder than doctrine. History as ever whispers its warning softly. The line between virtue and violence is as thin as a sheet of paper.